je suis un peu nouveau
Ah ben moi, je maîtrise pas
sur.
trop les trucs comme ça. De toute façon, c'est pareil.
Ah ben là, il est là. Ça y est, il est revenu.
Oui.
Il est là sur la droite, mais le temps qu'il arrive. OK. And screen. OK. We're starting now because the normal proceeding is out. So I will have to cut the first minutes. OK? All right,
Fine.
Paul?
Sure.
Okay, we start in 5 seconds. Okay, 4, 2. Hello, Paul Smith. Thank you for being here for this interview to our channel Global It Is. How are you, Paul?
I'm doing just fine. Thanks for having me on the show.
Thank you, Paul. Hello, David.
Thanks.
Comment vas-tu, David?
Je vais bien et je te remercie de m'avoir invité dans ton émission, Jean. So, Paul, I'm so glad to meet you because I want to say to you, congratulations for leading this investigation about a case less known than Roswell, but in my mind, perhaps Cape Girardeau is more important than Roswell. I think
I agree. Yes, it was 6 years before, and it got covered up pretty quick. And we're finding out little bits and pieces to this day. I'm hopeful the American government will reveal more in the coming month or two.
Yeah. Je te laisse continuer, Jean, si tu veux.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with what David just said. We'll know if we have a real disclosure sometime that actually,
yeah, hope so.
It was very important at the time, of course, and it gave way to what happened afterwards. We'll discuss that in a few minutes. Okay, Paul, we give a little portrait of yourself as the author of the book MO41.
Yes, I was born and raised in Cape Girardeau, and I went to school there, and my father was a paralegal to my grandfather, who was a city attorney for Cape Girardeau for many years. And shortly before the crash, they talked my grandfather out of working in that job because he kept leaving the house all the time on calls with the police. So if he had just stayed on the job like a year longer, he would have been there that night. My grandfather was a judge in 1941, and he was a good man, but I did not hear the story of the crash from him. So my mother was a grade school teacher. My father remarried, and he had a second wife who said she heard of the story when she was in high school in 1965. So that's well before the news of this became more popular in the mainstream press, at least a little bit, around the year 2000. So I tried to put all the clues together and come up with a book. And I've got a new one out July 6th called The UFO Bombshell Before Roswell from Llewellyn that'll have some updates, some new information, and make a few corrections on a couple of mistakes. My first book was Mo41. So I'm entitled to make a couple of small mistakes, aren't I? So it's a pleasure to be here and to talk to people who are like-minded and want to know all about the case.
Yeah, thank you very much for this introduction. It is true, we have here the covers of your first book, which I got translated in 2022. And the cover of the book. You have also the a couple of other books which have we cover at the end of this presentation. 2 accidents published in November 2016 which is a sequel to the first book about the Cape Girardeau. Can you say a word about this book, Paul?
I found a little more information and put together a second book. Then after that came out, the owner publisher of the book company died. His son took over and gave us a legal release form. We're now released from the company for good, and he's going to close the company down. Instead, he's been selling my book and other books that I wrote online and not giving me any money. So I went to a different publisher, and I've created a new book that'll kind of outdate the older one. But as long as people understand the story of the 1941 event, that was 6 years before the Roswell crash. That's why the title is The Bombshell Before Roswell.
Yeah. Then you authored the President Eisenhower Close Encounters, November 2020.
Yes, recently I've been contacted by a Hollywood producer, and we're close to signing a deal to get that book turned into a movie. So keep your fingers crossed there. And I wrote one on, thank you. And I wrote one on President Nixon going to an Air Force base on the 19th anniversary of the Eisenhower story. And that's under contract by a different Hollywood producer. So hopefully in the years to come, we'll see those on the big screen.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the cover of this book, I'll show it at the end. It is on Gleason, Alien Nixon Encounter, published in May 2023, right?
Right. That was fun to write, and I've been contacted by another producer, and I told him, I'm sorry, it's too late. I've signed with someone else. So it's nice that Hollywood is catching up with us, and making UFO movies like the big Steven Spielberg movie coming out, I think, in mid-June, not too far away.
Yeah. Yes, Disclosure Day. That's a title, I believe.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And
great
just
events,
this morning, the Trump White House released some UFO video in their first batch of disclosure. From what I've told, and I just saw a scant series of quick UFO videos, nothing too impressive, that they were taken in the Middle East over the past few decades. And so that's supposed to be the first step, and that we'll be getting more information and more videos in the months to come. So it could be a very exciting time for all of us and everyone who tunes into this show. And people who never gave thought to this issue before may have to rethink the topic, that we are being visited by at least a few different races, maybe more.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we had a lot of events in the media since July 2019, 17, with the New York Times article. Then the AIT program, then the book Skinwalker, the Pentagon, on the AUSA program by the DIA from 2008 to 2010, then the hearing at the Congress, David Grush, David Fravor, the Tic-Tac footage, etc. David Grush talked about several UFO crash retrievals that he had heard of. He talked about that in his hearing. So it's been a lot of talk about all of this. You talk about Ryan Wood at a certain point in your book. And Ryan Wood, in his book MAJIC EYES ONLY, signaled several dozens of UFO crashes on several continents.
I highly recommend that book. It's a wonderful book. And he's got a website, majesticdocuments.com. I highly recommend people access that and read these amazing documents that have been leaked over the years, some of them referring to the crash of 1941. I think we'll get into that a little bit later.
Yeah. Yeah, this is Magic Eyes Only. I have the cover to show in a moment too. So obviously to introducing this file, the Mystery 1941 UFO crash, will help people to understand that it's maybe only the tip of the iceberg, and many other UFO crashes have occurred on the planet which are still not disclosed. So it will prove very, very important. Leonard Stringfield talked about the crash too, the 1941 UFO crash in Mystery, in his status report. It was number 6, I think, of his status report. Do you have a word to say about it, about Leonard Stringfield?
Yeah, Leonard
Paul?
was the very first investigator to write about the story. He interviewed the main witness, I guess you could say, the granddaughter of the main eyewitness at the time, and he started the ball rolling and did a wonderful job, Leonard Stringfield.
Yeah, it was in the 91, 92, up to 1995, I think, the series of status report. He was a pioneer
Leonard, yes.
in studies. Also,
and he
his
also used
witnesses
to serve
have
in
been...
the Air Force. He was in the American military, and he knew the ins and outs and knew that the military was occasionally capable of lying to the American public. And hopefully we're not getting that, but these days, we'll see.
Here is Leonard Stringfield. Paul.
I see a photograph of Reverend.
There's Leonard Stringfield.
Yes. Yeah. He's passed away
Leonard
some years ago.
Stringfield was working.
Yeah, he did a good job, and so did another. Yes, Leonard Stringfield did a good job. So did another investigator you may have heard of, Stanton Friedman, who came to Cape Girardeau and investigated the case. And so did Ryan S. Wood. They both explored Cape Girardeau and looking for clues. So that shows me they were dedicated to getting to the truth, and we should listen to them, although Stan Friedman has now passed away, as has Leonard Stringfield.
Yeah. Stanton Friedman was the first to investigate into the Roswell case as well.
Doesn't surprise me. He was fearless. He was a good man.
True. Okay. So we'll get started with the case, Paul. So you explained that you were born in Cape Girardeau, you grew there, and you studied the communication at the university. Then how did you start? How did you get started with the 1941 Cape Girardeau UFO crash case in Mystery? How did you explained a while ago, but can you record again? How did it start to you?
Yes, I began to hear of the story around 1999, and it was discussed on the Art Bell syndicated radio program Coast to Coast AM, and I perked up and thought, well, that's my hometown, and I'd like to hear more about this. And I kept waiting for years for a book to come out, and there was none. So I started to research it, and I thought, I'll write this book myself. At the same time, a woman in Sykeston, Missouri, about 30 miles south of Cape Girardeau, where they had an Army Air Corps training program, was writing a book about her end of things. Her father was in the service then. Her name was Linda L. Wallace, and she did a wonderful job with an e-book that you could get online called Covert Retrieval. So her book came out just slightly before mine. Mine was published in print form and did quite well. And I'm pleased overall, though, like I say, I made a couple of errors, nothing too major. And I am always open to receiving more information on the case. Hopefully the government will provide some new facts.
I think, yes, her father was working as a sister base.
Yeah, my grandfather was a city attorney. My father was his assistant for many years in Cape Girardeau, and I went to the local university, and I worked in Cape Girardeau for a number of years, and then I moved away, but I still go there occasionally, and I've done on-the-ground research in the area where I think the crash occurred. I have not pinned it down precisely, and even if I did, I would not tell anyone, because this is farmland. It's people's private property. It's also their business, and they don't need strangers tramping around in their crops looking for fragments of a spaceship. I don't want to get sued. So even if I did know the precise location, I would not tell anyone.
So, okay. We can get started. Can you tell us a story, basically, the pastor Huffman, the town of Girardeau, the phone call he received, and I showed it some of the pictures of the town and the rendering of the event. Can you tell the story briefly to the people who don't know?
Sure. This is the Huffman family narrative. And it starts with Reverend William Huffman, a real Cape Girardeau Christian pastor who lived downtown near the Mississippi River, got a phone call one evening while he was at home. And he said, I have to go out. And when he came back, must have been close to 11 o'clock or midnight that night. He was shaken and ashen and quite upset. And his family asked, where have you been? What's going on? So he said, I'm going to tell you this story once, and I'm never going to repeat it again. And apparently he did live up to his word. He said that phone call I got earlier in the evening was someone associated with the Cape Girardeau Police Department. And he came by in an unmarked car and took me to a what we thought was an airplane crash outside of town on a farm. So we drove all the way out in the darkness, he said, and we could see this fire and flames, and the fire department was there. So we got out of the car and traipsed about 1/4 of a mile across this field on foot and saw this round silver disc, not an airplane at all, no propellers, no wings, no exhaust pipe, not a cylindrical object, but a round silver craft that had cracked open. And that there were many people there excitedly looking over this discovery. Apparently, a young man who worked on the farm called the police department, and in those days they were headquartered in the same building with the fire department, and reported, I think there's been a plane crash. Something has crashed and produced a big fireball on our farm and a blaze. So we need help. So the fire department and the police department went to the address, and obviously they too saw the fire glowing in the night. And the Cape Girardeau sheriff was there. Reverend Huffman said that he saw a man from the newspaper with a big camera, a big speed graphic flash camera, taking big flashbulb pictures, helping to illuminate the scene, which was lit by people with flashlights and lanterns and car headlights. So they could see what was laying in the field, along with the light from the blaze going on all around it. And little bits of metal shrapnel were laying in the grass and in the field. And they apparently came from the spaceship that blew open and crash landed. Next to the craft, Reverend Huffman knelt down and even touched one of 3 small gray alien beings with big bulbous heads, big black eyes, a tiny little slit for a mouth, 2 little dots for nostrils, and no apparent ears. They were positively creepy looking, like dolls almost, but they had crinkly skin, and one was barely alive and breathing. And Reverend Huffman held him by the wrist and said some prayers. That's what he was asked to do. He was a Baptist minister, and he said his prayers, and the creature went limp and died right in front of him. So he let go of his wrist. And he stood up and stepped back and discovered that two local men in plain clothes, were propping up one of the dead aliens under the arms for a photograph. And the newsman, who had the big speed graphic camera, instead whipped out a small Brownie box camera and took a photograph and walked away. And in Cape Girardeau, I had a distant relative named Garland Fronebarger, and he was known as One-Shot Frony. He would take pictures one time and walk away. Even my mother said when I was in college in Cape Girardeau, he took a picture of me and my sorority sisters and walked away. So it almost had to have been my distant relative, Garland Fronebarger. He was a newsman who would have been told to keep his mouth shut, and I think he did.
Yeah, we have his picture in your book. I have not put his picture in this presentation because I didn't think we would have time to talk about him. But of course, he is an important character in the case, an important witness, let us say, as he also did not make an account himself, I believe, but we have his picture. Thank you for reminding him. I didn't know that you knew him personally, Paul. It's a very good piece of news.
Yes. Reverend Huffman said that 2 or 3 weeks after the crash, the best of his recollection, that newsman showed up with a copy of this alien being propped up under the arms. And he said, I have a copy. I want you to have a copy. So the Reverend took it. He wasn't too thrilled, but he took the copy and hid it. And his granddaughter said, I got to see that photograph maybe 10 or more times. And that it was, as grandfather described, this creepy looking big-headed alien with big black eyes being propped up by 2 men in civilian attire. And they were on a farm. You could see a tree in the background. So the photograph was passed around in Huffman family parties in the early 50s, and then a neighbor took off with it, and it has not been seen since. So that's another frustrating angle of the story. We don't have this hard proof. Maybe someday someone will come up with another copy. I am hopeful.
Yeah. Paul, you explain in your book, you explain that Pastor Huffman gave the picture to his son Guy Huffman, and Guy Huffman, who is the father of Charlotte, was showing this picture to his family members, and he gave the photograph. He lent the photograph to another photographer, Wayne Fisk, who disappeared with a photograph, and Stanton Friedman found this Wayne Fisk in the Kirtland Air Force Base in Albuquerque.
That's right. And they asked him, what about this photograph? And he gave 2 or 3 different answers. He didn't want to give a straight answer. And finally, at one point, he lost his temper and said, yeah, I took the picture, but I gave it away, or I give it back to them. Don't ever bother me with this again. And so it was obvious he didn't want to talk about this. He was very slippery, and then he passed away in 2012, I think it was.
Don't you find it very suspicious that he was working by the Kirtland Air Force Base, which has been associated with UFO secrecy for a long time, with the Sandia laboratories and the Air Force Office of Scientific Investigation, having office in Albuquerque?
Mr. Fisk used to work in Army intelligence during the war. So he had a background in gathering secret information. So when he saw that photo, his eyes probably lit up, and he just knew that he had to steal this, take it away, that it was a big state secret that needed to be covered up. That's just my best guess. But it's a shame no one else has produced a copy of this. I hope someone watching this broadcast someday has a copy or knows where there's a copy. There's still more data out there. I'm hopeful that someone has a diary or their own scrap of evidence, a piece of metal they can send in to help prove the case. Supposedly, the crash happened near a small town near Cape Girardeau called Chaffee, Missouri, and that there were one or two people there who claimed that they had little bits of metal from the debris. And what happened to that, I don't know. But if word got out, I would imagine the government moved in and took it away from them. They wanted this covered up at all costs, frankly.
Hopefully, sometime, if we get a disclosure one way or another, maybe not the way we are expecting with the officials, but maybe we'll see these bodies, these alien bodies, sometime for the public
or
knowledge.
That maybe more people will come forward. They'll feel emboldened to say, this is what my grandfather saw, or this is what we kept in our attic for all these years. We were afraid to talk, but now people are discussing it because the government is releasing files. So I'm hopeful that someone will start to come forward, not just Cape Girardeau, but other stories. As you mentioned, there may have been dozens of other crashes, but I believe Cape Girardeau was probably the first on American soil.
Yeah. David, do you have a question before I start? I asked Paul to talk about Charlette Mann, the major witness. David, do you have something to say, to ask?
Yeah, about something in a passage in the book. Apparently, sometimes Pastor Huffman said there were 3 bodies or 6 bodies, because about the description, sometimes they are without crumple jumpsuit. I guess it was emotion, but I don't understand if there were 3 bodies or 6 bodies. What do you think about it?
We have to go back to Charlette Huffman Mann. Charlette was grandfather Huffman's granddaughter,
Yeah.
and she got the story not from a grandfather who passed away in 1959, but her grandmother, who was ill with cancer and dying in 1984. And on her deathbed, she told the story of what happened that night. And she said grandfather told the family that there were 3 bodies laid out in the grass on their backs, that someone had pulled them out of the cracked open craft, which may have actually killed the creatures because they weren't able to breathe in our oxygen-rich atmosphere. So I don't know if there were any other bodies. I've not heard that before. But the Reverend Huffman said he saw 3 bodies, and this is confirmed by another pastor who saw 3 bodies in Washington, D.C., which is a whole other story we'll get to, I hope. But 3 alien creatures that were apparently not even able to communicate verbally or mental messages, telepathy. So it's a frustrating case. We sure would like to know more, but it's so exciting to hear putting it all together.
Yeah, thank you. Now, thank you, David, for your question. I had the same question, actually. I was not sure whether 3 or 6, because sometimes it's difficult to understand in a book. Sometimes we get confused sometimes. Anyway, can you tell us precisely when and how did Charlette Mann come out with her account? She sent a letter on May 6, 1991 to Raymond Fowler. Can you recall?
Yes. She decided to gather up all the facts in her family. And after her grandmother died, and her father gave permission, I think, for this, to write it down and send it to a UFO investigator named Raymond Fowler, who passed the letter on to Leonard Stringfield, who investigated it. And that's how things got started. That Charlette Mann didn't really want attention and said she's not a big UFO person, but that this was a story of historic nature. I am told that Charlette died last October in Tyler, Texas, and I've tried calling her and it's all disconnected, so I assume that is correct.
Oh, so it's a piece of news. Charlette Mann passed away last year, 2025.
That is what I'm told, that she and her, I think, a husband did not want a lot of fanfare. They invited some friends over to the house for a kind of mourning period, and they did not even want her obituary listed in the news. It was, for some reason, kept kind of hush-hush, but I was notified, and there's not much we can do. Obviously, she was born in the early 1940s, and she was getting older, but thankfully, she did tell all that she knew. Her story did not change. She did not ask for money for the story. So I think that is all to her credit.
Okay. So she wrote this letter to the author and researcher Raymond Fowler, who was a famous, very well-known author at the time, right?
Yeah, somewhat famous. Even in the 1980s and 90s, UFO books and discussions were not all that mainstream. It's been building up since the Roswell case is becoming more and more famous, and so many UFO sightings, and now people are recording them with their cell phones, you know, taking video, and more images are going online. And it's difficult for the American military and government to control this issue. There's so many TV shows now on these sorts of things, fictional shows and movies, but also documentaries showing people's different videos of silver discs flitting around and little cubes or tic tacs and other things. And I think that is leading to disclosure, most reluctantly now, 85 years after the Cape Girardeau affair.
Yeah, I have no, it's not that. I have the picture of a portrait of Ryan Wood in presentation a bit further, and his book MAJIC EYES ONLY. So she gave you to Ryan Wood in 2001, and that Ryan Wood did a DVD, a documentary in 2007. Can you recall this event, please? For the French people,
yes, he did very fine work. Yeah, Ryan not only did this MUFON documentary or investigation, he got in touch with a producer for the sci-fi TV channel here in America, and they produced a special called "The Secret Evidence That We're Not Alone," and that raised some real eyebrows here in America. It was most revealing, showing these documents that Ryan collected, and they did about a 2-minute segment on the Cape Girardeau affair. They recreated Reverend Huffman going to the UFO crash and showed a recreation of the men propping up the alien under the arms for that one photo. And so that helped get the word out. And I'm told that someone who saw the show called up the Rush Limbaugh radio show, very famous Cape Girardeau native. My grandfather worked with Rush Limbaugh the first. My father knew Rush Limbaugh the second. And Rush Limbaugh the third, who was a broadcaster on the radio in Cape Girardeau, was my Little League umpire, calling the balls and strikes in my baseball games when I was a kid. So he was asked on his radio show, I think 2007, what's with this Cape Girardeau UFO crash? And instead of, denying it, or denigrating it, he said, there's more to this story than you might think. And he didn't want to talk about it, but then he moved on to another caller. So that tells you that Rush knew what was going on. His father and grandfather were leading citizens in Cape Girardeau, and his father was very obsessed with aviation and used to hang out at the airport and talk to pilots, and became a very fine pilot himself. So the story did spread in Cape Girardeau through certain people over the years. It was such a juicy story. You wanted to hear all about it. And other people, according to Reverend Huffman, were afraid to talk. There was a real atmosphere of fear in Cape Girardeau, which is located right near the Mississippi River. And it had about 20,000 people in 1941. And about double of that, 40,000 today.
Mm-hmm. And Ron Wood wrote 2 articles, one in the monthly UFO journal, and one for the symposium, for the annual symposium of the MUFON conference. So, and
yes, he's done a very fine job. Yeah. I commend him, and he wrote that big chapter on Cape Girardeau in his book, Eyes Only, as you have mentioned. And he's given symposium UFO conference speeches, and they're on video on YouTube. And you can go and see what Ryan has discovered. And he's done amazing work. So, you know, the word is spreading ever slowly, but you know, we always encounter skeptics and they want proof, and you know, that's been lacking. It's so tough. They want hard evidence, and the government took that away.
Mm-hmm. So you see, in France, we talk much about Roswell, but with Ryan Wood's work and Raymond Fowler from the beginning, and now in 2001, the articles, the interview by Ryan Wood, and the articles in the MUFON journal, and the speech by Ryan Wood on the Symposium, Missouri 1941 UFO well investigated in the United States and abroad, but in France it is still a little known. So this interview with you will help the French people know that it is really a well documented story, and through your book, obviously. So thank you for everything. We talk now about the Sisters Holt, which are another important witnesses. The two are their pictures. Can you start recalling the story of Helen Lucille Holt? People.
Right. The military came in and took away all the evidence that night, and they whisked it away, I think, to a Sikeston, Missouri airfield where they were training Army pilots. And from there, I believe it was taken directly to Washington, D.C. These two fine sisters spoke up towards the end of their lives. They're both deceased now. And they said, our father was Reverend Turner Hamilton Holt. And Reverend Holt told them both separately this story, that he went to the U.S. Capitol building in the early 1940s, or at least sometime during the Depression. They couldn't recall the exact year. But Reverend Holt went to the Capitol building with his cousin, Cordell Hull, the Secretary of State for Franklin Roosevelt. And Cordell Hull led Reverend Holt down several floors below the basement level, and there are several floors down below the Capitol building, down the hall to this special storeroom where there was no one about. And they opened the door to the storeroom and flicked on these light bulbs and saw 3 dead aliens in 3 glass jars. At first, the sisters thought they were 4, but then one of them blurted out, no, Father said there were 3 glass jars with 3 dead aliens described exactly as the Cape Girardeau affair, with big bulbous heads, black eyes. The Reverend Holt was really amazed and worried by the size of the skulls of these dead aliens that were kind of floating around in what appeared to be formaldehyde in these glass cylindrical containers. And he wondered if that gave aliens a huge brain power, superior intelligence. So Cordell Hull did not want to discuss too much, but he did want to get his cousin's reaction to this, and said, this is a matter of national security. We can't talk about it. We're afraid it might start a panic if people saw this. But Reverend Holt said there was also this big box of metal debris, and it had small pieces of shrapnel and larger segments that would slot together as a disc, a flying disc that had crashed. So again, this matches perfectly with what the Cape Girardeau minister saw, and now the Ohio minister confirms this. A few years ago, on New Year's Eve, I was called by an older man who said, my father worked for the FDR administration, and he took me on the last day of school to the Capitol building, and we too went down well below it. And my father took me to this storeroom and said, literally, well, this must be some kind of storeroom. And they went inside, and the older man was recalling to me that just like Reverend Holt and Reverend Huffman, there were 3 dead alien bodies and silver gray crash metal in that storeroom. So the father of this older man, his name was Rice, Arthur Rice, Stuart Arthur Rice, led him around the room, and they looked at everything, and then they turned out the lights and walked away. And he said, my father really did not talk about this with me any further because it was, again, a state secret, and he didn't want me to get into trouble blabbing about it. But he did talk about, on occasion, life beyond planet Earth and how we might be being visited. So there's a clue again. So there's a confirmation story of Reverend Holt and Reverend Huffman and these 3 dead alien bodies. It all comes together pretty nicely.
So do you mean, Paul, that you had you met an actual witness? I mean, someone who gave the account of his own father? That's what you mean?
Yes and no. He telephoned me. He must have been like in his 80s, and his father used to work with Cordell Hull, Secretary of State, and they worked in the Bureau of Statistics for Franklin Roosevelt. That's his dad. So I looked it up, and it turns out that, yes, Mr. Rice and Mr. Hull were good friends who even pieced together the United Nations after World War II in 1945. So again, the story hangs together and it fits well. And I think we can rely on these accounts. I haven't found anything that seems disingenuous or, a blazing lie. It all seems believable and fits the pattern of this story.
Okay, thank you. It's important to talk about Cordell Hull, as you have done just now, because he's not well known in politics. People know the name of Franklin Roosevelt. Truman, Harry Truman, has been associated, linked to the UFO secrecy as well, especially Eisenhower. But we don't know much about Cordell Hull, and I've reading your book that Cordell Hull has been Secretary of State for almost 10 years. It is a very long period of service.
He was well thought of by just about everyone. He worked faithfully for the government and for FDR, and they were fairly close. It's interesting to note that Hull is alleged to have taken Reverend Hamilton Holt under the Capitol to see these bodies that were stored there, these dead bodies well underneath the Capitol. When he passed away, Cordell Hull had his body interned in a crypt underneath a church in the Capitol, well below street level. It's a very strange coincidence, or maybe that's the way they did things. Franklin Roosevelt was a 32-degree Freemason, and almost everyone who worked for his administration was a Freemason, including the vice president and the director of the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover. I suspect Cordell Hull was also a Freemason, but I cannot prove it. But Hull was a very educated man who was a former congressman who used to work in the Capitol building and would have known all about the underground floors and storerooms that are down there. So once again, we can rely on these accounts, I'm pretty sure.
Well, sometime if we get a disclosure sometime, maybe we will understand that Cordell Hull was one of the first politicians to help disclose a few things at least.
Yeah. He wanted to get his cousin's reaction because he was a man of the cloth, as they say. He was a pastor in a church in Ohio. So I just heard the other day that some American ministers were gathered either in a room or a teleconference and given a briefing on UFOs. And that was, a modern example of trying to get the reaction of how people are going to handle this, that we are not alone and that we are being visited. And that's something that Cordell Hull did way back, apparently, in early 1941.
Yeah, and about this relationship between religion, a priest, a pastor, a politician, and then alien bodies or alien life.
Yeah, there's one thing, I guess Pastor William Huffman was shocked because it felt Easter weekend. I guess for the pastor, it was a big shock, I guess. You don't know about his granddaughter?
Yeah, in those days, there were no movies about aliens or television shows, and it wasn't something people would discuss or even have in comic book, really. There might have been Buck Rogers' cartoon or comic strip. I feel when I wrote my book in 2016 that April 12th was the likely date. I have now moved away from that. I feel it was more likely the night of April 24th. But Reverend Huffman was a good man, and if he was called to go to a plane crash site in Cape Girardeau to say some prayers, it makes sense because it was a very religious community in those days, and you would call a Christian pastor to offer comfort not only to crash victims of what they thought would be an airplane, but if relatives and friends started to arrive at the crash site, and they would be very upset. And so a pastor would have been called in to try to minister and pray with people. In Cape Girardeau, we had a lot of churches and a lot of ministers, but I feel that Reverend Huffman was likely selected because he lived across the street from the Justice of the Peace, who was an associate to the police department, and he probably just looked out his window and thought, Reverend Huffman's home, I'll call him. So that is my best educated guess. But Huffman was a good man. I went to the Cape Girardeau church where he used to work, and they led me to a private vault with his records, and I was allowed to peruse this. He performed baptisms and sermons, and he was felt to be a very fine man. They assured me he was well regarded. In World War II in 1944, I think it was, he moved his family to Oklahoma. And so they left town and took relatives with them. And then they moved to Kansas, where they met up with this man named Walter Fisk, who swiped that photograph of the alien.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, David, for your question. Yeah. Easter, of course, I believe he must have been shocked.
I think it's very symbolic for Huffman, I guess, because it felt the crash happened on Easter weekend. It's a big event for Christian. In the same time, there's this event nobody knows before. That's incredible.
Yeah, true. Question. We have Cordell Hull, we have the pastor Holt, the sisters. So can you recall when did the two sisters, Elaine and Lucille, give their account? They gave an interview in 2009 to Grant Cameron, but I've read that they sent a letter, a post-made letter in 1991, I believe, earlier.
Right. They knew nothing about the Cape Girardeau affair. They called a UFO researcher named Grant Cameron to try to relate this story that their father told them separately. And it turns out that the information that was being gathered about Cape Girardeau around the same time and a little bit later started to mesh. And in recorded interviews, they said these things happened. Father told us about the spaceship that he saw in pieces and the three bodies, and that he and Cordell Hull left and were told, keep this quiet, don't talk about it. He waited a few years to speak about it. He thought it was so important, but that it was another interview with another woman, I believe Linda L. Wallace, and she asked the two sisters, do you think this Cordell Hull, Reverend Holt event at the Capitol could have happened in 1941? And the two sisters agreed, yes, this could have been the year that it happened. So again, there's nothing in either story that is seemingly false or doesn't ring true.
Mm-hmm. They wrote a letter in 1991, in November 29th, 1991. Do you know this letter? Was it to what did I misunderstand something?
Yeah, they wrote a letter to Grant Cameron, the UFO researcher. He's mostly based out of Canada, but he's a good man, and he looked into the story too. So he he set up these interviews, and the two women sat down on a couch and recalled their memories of what their father told them. One of them admitted that when her father told her this story, she had a small child at the time who was squirming about, and that was her main focus as a young mother. And so she tried to listen to her dad, but it wasn't always easy. So the two sisters wanted to get that information out before they passed away, and I'm glad that they did. And it's been researched. I wish that the American media would pick up on these things, but so often the mainstream media in America is so skeptical, they don't really dig into this story. Maybe they are muzzled by the government, even if they wanted to report on such matters. So we have what you might call fringe investigators, private citizens like myself, to dig up the facts and look into the case and write about it and try to get some attention to it.
Yeah, a description by what the father told them from what he saw with Cordell Hull. Creatures soaking in the fluid resembled gray, crumpled children with unnaturally large round skulls. 3 glass containers. Well, that's it. More than 4 feet tall bodies, gray skin, long arms, spindly legs, large bulbous heads, black eyes, and 3 long fingers on each hand and a long thumb.
Right. That matches with what the Huffman family said in Cape Girardeau and what that photograph seemed to show. Being propped up, this alien that Charlette Huffman saw. And so, again, the stories coalesce perfectly. It's difficult to know what happened. I get asked this all the time. What happened after the bodies were kept under the U.S. Capitol building? I don't have proof, but I would think that they would have been taken to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, which had a leading metallurgical laboratory for researching crashed airplanes from other countries. And they would have probably taken it there to have the bodies and the wreckage examined and maybe turned into some sort of advanced weaponry they could use in World War II. That is an educated guess, though. I don't know that as a fact.
Yeah, it is a very educated guess, especially when we think that Ohio, Dayton, Ohio, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base is close to Missouri. French people here don't know the map of the United States, but you have to recall that Ohio and Missouri are neighboring frontier and border.
Well, they are fairly close, but I found out in further research that in a Cape Girardeau newspaper on April 25th, that a bomber airplane was circling over Cape Girardeau over and over, and people were wondering, are we about to be bombed? What's going on? So the bomber pilot came to town a week later and explained, I was on a test flight from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio, and we decided to circle around Cape Girardeau and go home. Now, I feel like that might well have been the morning after the crash, that they were looking for more evidence of a crash, because there's extensive photographic and survey equipment aboard like a B-17 or a B-52 bomber. These were huge, very expensive airplanes. You didn't just take them out on a joyride. There had to have been a specific mission. So an aerial reconnaissance of the ground would have been perfectly normal. And that's why I'm leaning towards April 24th now as the night of the crash. And this holds together that President Roosevelt on the morning of the 25th gave a press conference in Washington, D.C. at the White House. And reporters noted in stories later, it seemed odd he kept referring to hemispheric defense and the need to defend America, you know, and its skies. So he couldn't come out and say there's been a spaceship crash, but, you know, from what Roosevelt talked about on the morning of Friday, April 25th, again, makes sense from what we know now, that there was this alien crash and that a bomber plane was dispatched from Ohio to fly over Cape Girardeau and then fly home to see, you know, what they had on the ground. It was such a huge airplane, it might have landed in Sykeston to pick up the crash recoveries and take them either to Wright-Patterson or to Washington, D.C. That would make sense also, because it was this huge cavernous airplane that was like 10 stories off the ground. Again, this is speculation on that aspect, but I think it is a logical guess. They had to fly the spacecraft and the body somewhere and take it away.
Yeah, good. It is a good transition to Wright-Patterson, to General Marshall, to the memo, to the majestic documents, memo by President Franklin Roosevelt. I had an interview with James Clark days ago. I told David about that. But do you know James Clarkson, or by name at least?
I know him by name. I've not met the gentleman, but he's done some good investigative work too. So I applaud you for having him on the show.
Yeah, I translated one book by James Clarkson, which is called in English June Crane, her name, the Air Force, UFOs. And I got translated June Crane, l'Air Force, the same title. And it is about an account by a lady who was 17 years old, 1942. And 1942, she joined the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. She was just there, just outside the Air Force Base. After December 7th, 1941, the Pearl Harbor attack and the U.S. Getting into the Second World War, the Wright Field became a huge facility. There were only, I think, 4,000 employees at the time. And 2 years later, there were 35,000 employees and 300 buildings in Whitefield. So it became huge at the time. And she witnessed many related to UFO crashes. They talk about the mystery case and obviously the Roswell case. So now we'll try to get, as I told, comment a little about this what we call majestic document, which is called a memo. So there is one memo by President Roosevelt to this gentleman, General Marshall, who were chief of. Here is Ryan Wood, famous Ryan Wood, who authored MAJIC Eyes Only. Here is his article to the MUFON UFO Journal. We see Charlette Mann and and the pasteur. It is an article by Ryan. Here is the full text of Ryan Wool's article as well about Cape Girardeau crash. The book Magic Eyes Only, published in 2005-2007. And here, the memo by President in France, since we are doing this show for French people. See, President Franklin Roosevelt to General Marshall, February 42, 7th,
right,
from Majestic Domain site. So here was the White House, Washington, the date 1 of 1942, Chief of State, the Army, by the President to the Chief of State of the General Marshall. Let me read to you. I know I don't have the text here, but in from why do I don't have the I don't.
Well, I can
in front of others. Why?
Yes, I can speak about those if you like. They seem to be authentic memos from President Roosevelt and mentioning the new Non-Terrestrial Science and Technology Committee. Gee, what a coincidence there that he would form that after the Cape Girardeau crash. And he referred to these celestial wonders that have come to us. And he doesn't say it right out. I don't think he could in front of his secretary, but everyone knew in the know between himself and the probably the vice president and the Army Chief of Staff, George Marshall, that they were going to investigate these crash recoveries and try to turn them into some kind of super weapon of war to fight the Nazis and the Japanese in World War II. And they may have taken atomic secrets from the propulsion system of the Cape Girardeau craft. It's not for sure, but they may have taken that and completed the atomic bomb weaponry that was dropped on Japan to win the war. And that would be an amazing story in itself. But President Roosevelt wrote these memorandums to Dr. Vannevar Bush and to General George Marshall and said, these are state secrets. We're not to discuss this outside our closed circle of people in the know. But it is once again pretty close to confirmation, what we call in America a smoking gun, that they were talking about what they recovered and were examining from the Cape Girardeau crash.
Yeah, exactly. Here we are on 27 February 2042, all right? And this takes place 2 days Los Angeles Battle of Los Angeles, 25th of February 1942. Remember? So apparently we have this memo by the president to General Marshall, but he refers also to things that they already had. That it means that we understand from this memo that they heard from 8 months, say, en French, la consulte de Dr. Bush et d'autres scientifiques sur les usages pratiques qu'il convient de trouver pour les secrets atomiques après étude des dispositifs célestes. Celestial devices. That's the sentence used by President Roosevelt, right, Paul?
Yes. George Marshall was allowed this information. There was a scientist in Mexico City in the 1950s who saw a UFO, and they were destined to meet General George Marshall. And he told them at the time, we don't really talk about UFOs in our country, but I can tell you 3 have crashed, and the aliens on board were not killed in the wreck itself, but when they were exposed to our oxygen-rich atmosphere, they had their inner organs were incinerated. They couldn't breathe. So that, again, matches the Cape Girardeau crash, in which the 3 aliens were found seemingly without injury, but dead, and they were exposed to this different atmosphere suddenly than what was inside their craft. So I think General Marshall knew the secrets, as we see in these memos. There's another memo that listed another man, and his name was Dr. James B. Conant. Dr. Conant was a leading scientist and a colleague of Einstein, and the scientist listed Dr. Vannevar Bush. And I found out for my new book that on April 25th, what I feel like is the morning after the crash, FDR called in Dr. James B. Conant to the White House for a discussion around noon. And it was behind closed doors. So there's another little piece of the puzzle. And Dr. Conant is named in one or two of these documents. So again, the story hangs together. Who else would you turn to other than these leading academic scientists that have worked with the government in the past and knew how to keep secrets?
Yeah, here in the memo by the president to the special committee on non-terrestrial science and technology. It's an incredible name of a memo by President Roosevelt of February 1994. Il say in French, je partage l'avis que l'application du savoir-faire non terrestre en matière d'énergie atomique doit être utilisée pour perfectionner de telles armes de guerre. So the use of non-terrestrial must be used atomic energy must be used in the war against Japan. So it means they had found atomic energy in one craft, and allegedly it was a mystery craft.
It's important to let our viewers and readers to know that the Cape Girardeau crash happened about 8 months before Pearl Harbor. While many in Europe and in France were fighting for their lives, America had not yet joined the fight, so that they could afford to look over the craft at their leisure and hide it below the Capitol building. And then they realized we're going to be drawn into this war, and we were in America in December 1941. So they, I think, accelerated their program to research and reverse engineer the craft metal and its secrets of atomic propulsion. So Dr. Bush and Dr. Conant did whatever they could to help weaponize the crash recoveries to try to help the war effort. This was the foremost thing on FDR's mind, winning the war. And he says that in one of the memos. He says, you know, we've got to win the war, then we can do more with examining the crashed disc. He didn't use that term exactly, the celestial wonders that have come to us. So fighting the Nazis in Europe and in the Japanese in the Pacific was the prime importance at the time.
Yeah, in French, mon opinion personnelle est que quand on aura gagné la guerre, un temps viendra où des fonds seront affectés, mettre en œuvre un programme de la science et l'écologie, et dans la page suivante apparaît l'expression du président Roosevelt, comprendre la science et la technologie de ces merveilles célestes, si je me souviens bien. Celestial wonders, right? De ces merveilles non terrestres qui seront encore larges. J'ai eu des discussions avec le Dr Bush, pris le conseil scientifique, tirer avantage de telles merveilles. de telles merveilles qui nous ont été données. Okay, now we have the MAJIC EYES, the Project Whitehot. Donc, tirer avantage de telles merveilles qui sont arrivées jusqu'à nous. So that is very meaningful in any language. So the third document in the White Hot report by General Twining to President Truman. We are in 1947, the year of the world crash. We are no more around the mystery, but we are 2 months after the world crash, and it is General Twining who is in office at Wright-Patterson, writing a report to the new President Truman, who took over in 1940, Roosevelt's death. And then what do you say about this document?
I believe that they are shocking and amazing in detail. The 1947 White Hot report is amazing. I wish more people would read this. President Truman sent Air Force General Nathan F. Twining to New Mexico to look into what they had recovered from the desert. And in his report, summing up what they had found, he literally says, we've decided that the Roswell crash wreckage was extraterrestrial in nature when compared to the 1941 discovery in Missouri. So, you know, what more proof do you need than that? There's 2 different references to the Missouri recovery of 1941 and that it was extraterrestrial. And that so was the Roswell crash. And they knew what Roswell was by comparing it to the Cape Girardeau affair.
Exactly. I have the extract. You have one here in French. People can read. L'aérodine lenticulaire non identifiée, qui a été désignée sous le nom ULAT, ULAT 1 a été identifié comme un engin d'origine inconnue. Il ne présente aucune aile, fuselage, nacelle. Les systèmes de propulsion indiquent clairement qu'il n'est pas d'origine russe. They from the paperclip. Apparently, they sent Werner von Braun to study the Roswell crash, and he ascertained that it was not Russian, because as a German, he was supposed to know about the Russian technology or the Russian writing, because the Germans were in contact closely to the Russians. So apparently, Werner von Braun confirmed the writings on the Roswell debris were not theoretic writing. And then, as you said, that at a certain point they reference to the General Twining refer to the 1941 un très haut degré de sophistication qui n'existe pas dans ce pays. So that is very meaningful. It was not American. So the section or section, I think it was section 3. I wrote section 3. Scientific probabilities. I don't know if you can read here. If you can manage to read, if you know this document. And in French, is low to charge, but sur la base de tous les indices collectés sur les objets étudiés, AMC, all this organism, RAND, US Army Air Force, ONR, Office of Naval Research, you know this department, ils sont considérés comme non terrestres. On est parvenu à cette conclusion. We managed to this conclusion as a result of comparisons or from facts with, and you know, this part is missing, 1941. So in this document, which you know, which has been redacted, Paul, we understand that they refer of the UFO crash from 1941, and this part has been redacted.
Right,
you
but
know
the
that, of
words
course,
from the Missouri fit right into that redacted space perfectly. If you use the letters from the Missouri, looks
Yeah.
like they put that in there and covered it up.
Let me show it again, the part, the original. Yeah, it's that's here. You see, on the third, fourth, fifth, sur la sixième ligne, vous voyez Discovery in 1941, la découverte en 1941. Et donc, ce qui renvoie à cette partie, en anglais, vous savez, les adjectifs, la description avant, pas David. Donc, tout ce qui décrit cet événement, Discovery en 1941, la découverte de 1941, c'est pas après, c'est avant. Et donc, en anglais, on comprend qu'il y aura écrit, c'est ce que nous a dit Paul, il y aura écrit la découverte d'un crash d'OVNI à Cape Girardeau ou en Missouri en 1941. Et ça a été caviardé, évidemment, pour les raisons qu'on comprend. Yeah, obviously it was a Cape Girardeau UFO crash, as they didn't want anyone to know. But fortunately, we have Paul Blake Smith, and we have Ryan Wood, and all that makes a wonderful teams. And we know that actually there was a crash in Cape Girardeau in Missouri in 1941. There is a last one in the last section of this white hot report by General Twinning, and we'll close that with the cover of your book. It was not from German technology either, and section 5, page 16 of the 19-page document from the MAJIC document page, and that's it's redacted as well. It's redacted, and I have to find a better connection because I think that's the reason. In the first months of 1942 up to today, intrusion of aerial objects, non-identified aerial objects have been documented, but no serious study has been carried out by the intelligence services. Even now, even the case, so next page, even I think it is even the 1941 case or even the Missouri case, we'll see how it put by General Twinning. Now, even the recovery 1941 has not been followed by information operation. So in this end of the Paul, the General Twinning refers the 1991 recovery operation.
Right. What else could it be? Deemed extraterrestrial in nature. Yeah. From 1941. What else could it be? You know, it has to be the Cape Girardeau affair.
Yeah. Obviously, I have strong evidence case and of the cover-up that has been carried out not only from 1947, the Roswell event, but from 1941. It means President Roosevelt was aware of the alien presence on Earth from 1941. And not only President Truman, not only President Eisenhower, but from the 40s, from 1941, the officials were aware, and he wanted some information to be released. And he used his own cousin, Pastor Holt, for this purpose.
We should probably mention a quick story that the Roswell debris was the strange metal that even June Crane was allowed to handle, and she couldn't fold it. It would unfold in front of her, and it had strange symbols printed in it. So Reverend Huffman in the Cape Girardeau affair peeked into the cracked open spaceship, and he said there was a round metal silver band in the top part of the cockpit or flight deck, and it had these strange metal symbols that he didn't understand, like Egyptian hieroglyphics. He didn't know what it was. So those two stories kind of match up. Something was imprinted in the metal. Reverend Huffman said he saw like a display panel with some gauges and dials and tiny little seats that would have been for children if they had been for humans. So he did report this. And one man from the farm community near Cape Girardeau said he had the metal from the crash, and there were strange symbols imprinted in it. So again, like Roswell, same sounding description of the aliens and the craft and the strange metal that had these symbology put into the metal itself. Weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, close maybe with one word by Herman Oberth and Edward Teller, and the other one is we have Herman Oberth. I'm sure you have read his previously. He said in a press conference 1944, Professor Herman Oberth, considered by someone to be the father of rocketry and the new space age, was asked how our technology had suddenly become so advanced. He said, "We cannot boast of having been alone in the progress made in the scientific fields. We have been helped." Oberth candidly replied. When asked by whom, the exfiltrated Nazi answered with astonishment, "By the peoples of other worlds." Oberth went on to speak publicly about flying saucers. They came from another
somebody talked too much. He said some things that were not supposed to be said aloud, but he admitted we got help refining our atomic weaponry from crashed debris from people from another world. And he's an esteemed scientist, a very serious man. And when he said this, it made some newspapers at the time. And so that's another little clue that the Cape Girardeau recovery and perhaps some others help refine atomic weaponry and might even be to this day why we hear so many UFOs hovering over atomic missile sites in military bases, especially in America. And, they are concerned what we are doing with atomic weaponry, and we may have refined it from their technology. Wouldn't that be amazing?
Herman Oberth was part of the Manhattan Project, of course, at Los Alamos with Oppenheimer, with Edward Teller. He was one of the leading American scientists of German origin, coming through the paperclip operation. And Edward Teller, another major scientist from European origin, of course, as well, said there is on majesticdocument.com webpage, there is a 5 pages private report from physicist Edward Teller to President Reagan in the years 80. He said a danger has been seen in 1939, 2 years before a UFO was captured, before Pearl Harbor. If it is 2 years,
that's right.
So
this was
1939 is 2 years before the event. It means the event was in 1941.
Here was a serious leading scientist, a brilliant man, mentioning almost casually that we discovered a spacecraft from another world 2 years after 1939. And so, once again, what else could this be? It's got to be Cape Girardeau, Missouri.
Yeah, here we have the picture of Edward Teller. Here's a picture of if you want. No, I have to check here.
Yeah, there.
And then I have it doesn't. It will come. Yeah, Edward Teller. And then we have another nuclear physicist who was exfiltrated from Germany too with Operation Paperclip. He worked at Livermore National Laboratory from 1962 to 1967, stating that the American scientific community perfected the atomic bomb using advanced extraterrestrial technology picked up from a crashed disk that was transported from a landing site in Missouri in 1941 to secret laboratories. Unfortunately, I could not upload a picture of Otto Kraus.
I don't think I found one either. But Otto Kraus was waiting for an atomic bomb test in Nevada to go off, and he was spending time playing cards with a photographer who was ready to take pictures of the atomic blast. And so they started talking, and Dr. Kraus said, "Oh, we perfected our atomic weaponry thanks to technology taken from a UFO crash in Missouri, in the Ozarks." And, again, this has to be the Cape Girardeau affair, which may have changed history in this amazing way.
He was in Los Alamos as well with Oberth, Edward Teller, right? He was in the Los Alamos,
right.
Manhattan.
Yeah.
So okay. Thank you for everything. We'll only just now show the cover of your book. Your book covers, Paul, because you have we talked about that a while ago. Here is a speech, an interview you had with Outer Limits Magazine's radio with Chris Evers, whom I know personally, and you are talking about your book on President Roosevelt, President Eisenhower, Close Encounters. It was in 2021, I think.
Right.
You went to travel. Did you travel to England?
No, I've never been to England. I'll point out real quick.
Okay.
Eisenhower served in England and in Europe and helped coordinate World War II efforts to defeat the Nazis. And apparently he was presented with a number of Foo Fighters type UFO sightings during the war. And even then, he was reported by an eyewitness to have said, "We can't let this out. We have to keep it a secret. It might cause a panic." Eisenhower in 1941 was a somewhat obscure Army colonel, I believe, working in Washington State, not the city. So he did not really factor into the Cape Girardeau affair. But Eisenhower became president, and I think they had some contact with a friendly, human-like extraterrestrial race, and he spoke to them in English, and they brought up their worries about our atomic weaponry. Again, this is foremost on the minds of aliens, how we are threatening our entire planet with American weapons of war and a few other countries. So that's an amazing story too in itself, and hopefully we'll see that in a new movie in the years to come.
Yeah, it is a 1954 meeting on the Edwards Air Force Base in California. Right, Paul?
Right. Eisenhower went there pretending to play golf, and he disappeared one night. And eyewitnesses said, "I was there, and I saw him speak English with these friendly human-like aliens who urged him to cut back on their atomic bomb detonation test program." And Eisenhower said, "Well, I'm not going to do this unilaterally. I want to see other nations, cut back on atomic weaponry." So there may have been an agreement formed. That's a little unclear exactly what was discussed, but I put it all in my book, and I hope UFO fans will find that very interesting too.
Yeah, thank you. In a way, it is a very important fact, and it has been discussing a lot, commented a lot, even in France. And there was another meeting in 50 Hollow base in New Mexico. Another a completely different meeting, probably. Anyway,
Right.
here is the cover of your book with a bit. 20. I translated the first, the revised 2020 edition, and then there are the three the book on the three presidents. Here, sorry, I don't know why the cover has been twisted. Anyway, we see Roosevelt on the top right. Truman on the top left, and President Kennedy. And here, second edition of the same book.
I believe they came out with two different covers. That book is supposed to be out of print, but I think this unscrupulous book publisher now may be still selling it. I would prefer people buy the new Cape Girardeau book, which is from Llewellyn Publishing, out July the 6th.
Okay. Yeah, which is so Paul Blakesmith's new book on July the 6th, almost the anniversary of the Roswell event. we don't know exactly the date. According to Tom Kay, it is the night from the 3rd to the 4th, but nobody knows precisely. So your book on the President Roosevelt, Close Encounter, I want to I've not read it, but I hope you allow me to translate it, Paul, when we can do that. It should be right. The same book, Paul.
Yeah, that's the audio book that
cover.
you can listen to.
Okay.
Yep. And there's the new one.
Okay, audio book.
Yeah.
It's amazing how the world may change between now and July 6th when it comes out. We have all this disclosure starting and the new Steven Spielberg movie. Between now and then, we'll just see what July 6th is like. Yeah. Maybe a very different world than now here in May.
True. Yeah, we are all very expecting a lot of expectation with Steven Spielberg movie. David, you talk about this movie around you? Are people very curious on it on your channel? Or?
Oh yeah, me the first. I'm so excited because I think I noticed something strange. Like since my childhood, if you watch Jaws by Spielberg, at 1 hour and a half, you can see something strange in the sky. I'm a director of short film, so I know there are different axes of camera. So the object in the sky in the movie Jaws, you can see it from the right and the left and again and again. It's not a meteorite. It's not something like that. I watched it recently on a 4K UHD, perfect image, and I can see the object is blue and orange. It's not a meteorite. It's doing like that and that and that. I don't know what's this. It's on Jaws. Have you noticed that?
I have heard this rumor, and now I want to see the movie all over again to see and focus more on this. So I have seen the movie, but I'd like to see it once more and review that footage that you're talking about. That is very interesting.
Yeah, you will see.
Okay.
It's amazing in the sky. When the three characters are outside the boat on the night, you will see the object.
Okay, I'll look for that.
Yeah, that's amazing. So yes, of course, I'm so excited by a new Spielberg movie because I think he knows a lot of things about Close Encounters and all of that. Because in coincidence, you've got this on Jaws. 2 years after, he made Close Encounters of Third Kind. So in my mind, when I was a child, I thought Spielberg knows, because when you edit a movie, you see this thing in the sky. He let this in his movie. So I think, I don't know, but it's a supposition.
Paul, I've read that Spielberg brought travel fee because his was married to Chaffee's mayor, or the son of Chaffee's mayor, right?
Kate Capshaw is an American actress who lived in the small town I've mentioned, Chaffee, Missouri. She was married and had a daughter by the son of the mayor. And then when she split up with this man and got a divorce, she would fly with Steven Spielberg to the Cape Girardeau airport and drive to Chaffee to pick her up or bring her back from visitation. So the crash site in the American farm country was in 1941, maybe not too far from the airport, from what I keep hearing. So what does Spielberg know about 1941? I don't know. Maybe he'll make a reference to it in his movie, or again, he may not talk about certain things. When he created the movie Close Encounters in 1977, he worked with Dr. Jacques Vallée, famous French UFO researcher, and Dr. J. Allen Hynek, and they gave him real-life stories for him to use in that movie. So I think Spielberg knows plenty, and we're going to find out what he knows when his big Disclosure Day movie debuts next month.
Yeah, we all have a lot of expectation. I'm sure he knows about the mystery case. He was in Chaffee. I've learned some.
I suspect so.
Right.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. So there's a cover of your book, in the first cover of the Kindle edition, and then I changed the cover, as you know. I changed the cover to something else, something more discreet, with a picture of General Marshal Cordell Hull. On the left, we see Vannevar Bush, and the bottom, Pastor Huffman and President Roosevelt. I like better. I like this cover.
I like it. Looks fine to me.
And
thank you.
Thank you. People like it. I am proud with font, with the old-fashioned font. And then again, I put that at the end because who knows if Pastor Huffman didn't come back through this street coming that night from the crash site, and am I going to talk to my people at the church? What am I going to say to my wife and daughters now that I know for sure that there are beings, sentient beings from. So that's it. And the last picture,
I think he told the truth. He was a good man. Yeah. He was an honest man who just told the truth, I think.
Yeah. Thank you, Pastor Huffman, to have been so sincere and courageous to talk to your wife and children. So just Frankie Rowe, Marcel, others. And thank you to investigators like you, Paul, like Donald Schmidt and others, Stanton Friedman, who have done the good job for us, for all humankind, who we have the right to know and we have the need to know.
Right. It's up to the private citizens like us to look into the case. Yeah. So I thank both of you for your interest and your work in translating it. And it's a wonderful story. And hopefully this show will get the word out and more people will take an interest. I sure thank you for having me on today.
Great. Thank you very much, Paul. Talk to you soon for being there. Do you have a last word, David, to Paul and the people?
perhaps you will think it's a strange question, but when I do investigation on a land site, it was in France, not a crash, but a close encounters of first kind. 2 times I went on land sites, and I felt strange atmosphere, but also like how present forces. Have you heard about witness in the land site of Cape Girardeau feeling something strange in this land site or no?
Oh, I think I've heard of that people who go to crop circles get strange sensations, and people who go to maybe where a crash has occurred. I have not heard of that in Cape Girardeau. It's largely still a secret that farm people don't want you there, and they don't want to encourage you to go traipsing around in the crop. So even if such a story could be true, it hasn't gotten out.
Okay, thank you.
Paul, I hope that sometime we'll have the right to visit the crash site in Roswell, and sometime we'll have the right to see the crash site at south of Cape City and Chaffee. I'm dreaming of that.
I'd like to buy the land and charge people to show up. I think the whole world would show up. I would want to see that too. But again, for now, it's private property. And I've also been told that farmland is very dangerous with copperhead and rattlesnakes. You don't want to walk around in there. It's got a lot of big venomous snakes. Don't even go into the field.
Okay.
They're doing a good job. The rattlesnake protect the site. That's good. Thank you to them.
That's right.
Thank you to you, Paul. Thank you, David. And talk to you another time, Paul.
Sure. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
So I leave. Okay.